Awesome, thank you.
Thank you, Jerome. I just sent out a notice to the media and to anyone that was on that original email.
Thank you. Delayed feedback, we're gonna hear ourselves on it, huh? Can we mute that thing? We don't have a, delayed feedback, we're gonna hear ourselves on it, huh? Mute that thing? We don't have it.
You're trying to turn the volume down on the TV.
Put it on mute. Out of this, I don't know. Nothing we can do.
Sound like a way, is there a sound more somewhere?
That's okay. Well, should we just try to ignore the feedback?
I guess so.
Okay.
Oh. Can you move the phone away from it? The little cell phone?
Whose is this?
I think that might be Jerome. I don't know.
I don't know if that's it. Okay. Well, should we just try to ignore the feedback?
Looks like we're on a delay as well.
Can you move the phone?
And this is not gonna work.
I think it might be Jerome. I don't know.
Volume-wise, we're gonna get all turned around. We're getting a delay.
Can you turn that sound bar off, the feedback?
We moved that cell phone down thinking it might be some feedback from that.
Perfect.
Perfect, thank you.
Is that your cell phone? Oh, yeah, thank you.
Sure.
There you go.
Thank you so much. All right, we can get this meeting started, I guess.
35 free minutes of Zoom left. Better get rolling here, huh?
Let's go for it. Let's start with, since we're talking about all these election laws, let's start with the 2021 election law changes. Jennifer?
So basically, you have a packet in front of you of some election law changes that have been collected from Benton County, our county, other conversations with,
That's this.
different counties, it's the election law changes. You have failed bills from 2019 and 2017, just because sometimes those come back up. And then, what would be a limited election calendar based on the two different scenarios, like a March primary and then a May primary. And then information about tribal IDs and accepting tribal IDs as additional supplemental information for all of the talking points for the election laws. So basically, that's the packet you have in I've got everything, I
Okay,
think,
so that's-
listed in order.
That's basically just an overview,
Mhm.
right? So let's just jump in with miscellaneous election laws.
So, you want me to just go down?
Yeah, go down the list, that's probably the easiest thing.
So, the candidate withdrawal, of course, we had this happen, in Washington City and Clinton County this year.
Yeah.
With a candidate withdrawing after the certification deadline and the ballot certification. They proposed a similar law to correct this in 2019, but it was withdrawn. I don't remember the particulars of why it was withdrawn, but I think the law does need to be changed, but I think it needs to be changed in the same manner as when you have, for instance, we had a primary, or a JP candidate who had to withdraw, and you had a specific reason why you withdraw. It's either, you're no longer in the area or serious illness. I don't think those were included in the original bill, and so that would strengthen it and possibly make this a bill worth pursuing to prevent having a special election or a runoff election when you don't need one.
Okay.
And then,
shall we talk about these before we go any further?
Yeah, let's hit the main ones. I don't know if we should go down every single one of these. I'm just not sure if we possibly can. But like these main ones, I agree this is a important one. And current state of the law, under Arkansas law, after ballots are certified, a candidate cannot withdraw from the election, right? And I agree that that's something that should be changed, because we experienced that here in Washington County this time.
Okay. Response on it, Bill?
I agree. I think there needs to be some provision, for some latitude in that regard.
Mhm.
So, it's something that needs to be looked at. It just complicates folks' lives, ours and the candidates' lives.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Go on, Jennifer.
the next set, the 1, 2, 3, different sets deal with really the notice of election publication and the fact that the newspapers are not actually printing newspapers anymore except for a Sunday edition. And will that even continue? I'm assuming it will.
Right.
But it does change when we have to publish our notice of election and actually making it accessible to the voters. And also the publication date of the notice of election don't mesh with the notice of poll workers publication that has to be posted, that information we include in our notice of election. The actual publication date is after, when people could object. We always make sure that we publish in advance so that it is there. But I do think that there are some things that can be looked at in regards to the publication, especially the cost of publication. If we are mostly just a non-print newspaper and everybody is typically having access to it online, instead of publishing a big document, could we publish a link to our website? And so I think that those definitely are things that are worth pursuing for a legislative change.
Okay, you're required to print twice, and it was $5,100 per time, correct?
Yes.
And, I guess you published on Sundays so that it was a physical copy of the newspaper.
Yes, we made sure that we published on Sunday for that very reason. We're not required to, we're only required to publish it on the 20 or the 5 day or a general primary or the 10 or the 5. And so technically, if we didn't publish on Sunday, and you're publishing when it's just an online paper, could you, instead of publishing the whole big document, could you not just publish
A link.
a link?
Yeah.
Can you do that in the paper? Can you publish legal notices on non-Sundays? I don't know, other than I had my assistant look into it because we had to publish notices for, I don't remember what the action was I filed, but I thought, Anyways, whoever at the paper told her that they only publish legal notices on Sunday. I don't read the paper every single day thoroughly. Do you know, Bill?
I don't either now. We get it online and Sunday, but I've never really paid any attention to legal notices during the week when they're running it online.
Yeah.
But I would think that they would be responsive to doing it during the week. Now, they may have a policy that's not practical, whatever.
They publish classified during the week, it's just you have to view them online.
Right. How much did y'all, end up paying for publication?
It was right at, $9,000.
Okay, so we're in the same ballpark?
Well, you have the same paper.
Oh, that's true. It's a different county, come on.
I know.
Okay.
Paper doesn't look at counties.
No, they don't, you're right. Okay, well, I mean, are there other requirements in this notice of publication that we need to really evaluate to not just make changes around the edges such as providing a link instead, because, I don't know, they might charge you more for a link.
Well, they charge you by the size, basically, right now, and I don't know, I would assume the link would be.
It would be much smaller,
Right. The only thing, I think everything that's in the notice right now is stuff that does need to be published in the
Right,
notice, because
right.
it's all the basic information.
But I guess what I'm saying, are there other, things that are related to publication that we should look at? You've got several different, codes that you've got, cited here.
It's some of them are the same code, and some of them have to do with the school elections too.
Oh,
But
yeah,
now we're
yeah,
in charge
yeah.
of publishing everything for
Yeah.
the school election. There is some other publications that I don't have listed here. For instance, when a city calls for a special election, the city is publishing their documents calling for the special election, and then I turn around and have to publish that
Oh,
legal
redundant.
ordinance. It is. There are some various things in the law in regards to publication that I don't necessarily have here that are redundant and end up costing the city,
Right.
because publications for their ordinances are quite expensive. And if they're having to publish it once, why is the election commission having to publish it, and then we charge the city for it? So basically, so I do think that.
They're getting double billed in a sense.
Exactly, because we're required to publish those as well.
Yeah.
So I think that we definitely can look at some other publication areas as well, that need to be.
Well, in a case like that, though, you have apples and oranges going on here. You have the city that's required under certain statute to do certain things.
Mhm.
And then along comes the election. Now that they've called for it and notified the public they're gonna do it, that's a local issue. Then they call for an election.
Mm.
Well, then that's the election commission's responsibility, and the legislature handles those regulations. Therefore, I don't know if there's a way to mesh the two together
Yeah.
anyway.
Well, and again, this is one of those things where when they change one part of the law and then they don't change another part, or they find a way with changing one part to confuse another part, that's why I'm asking, we need to take a wider lens of the whole process to see how it would, in some respects simplify, and in other respects save us the $10,000.
Right. And I think the publication and the publishing of the legal documents and everything, we're duplicating what the city has already published. So, I don't know that it's necessary for us to duplicate what the city has already done.
Sure.
Jennifer,
Well-
if you take that special election that we had with Special Heights and Springdale, you were publishing it, we were publishing it, the city was publishing it. I don't know how much that ended up costing the city, because it was published, 6 different times by me, 6 different times by you, and it's the exact same thing every single time.
So for the counties that overlap as well with the city,
Plus, there's really some confusion there potentially for the voters because they're thinking, oh, this is a new election?
Well, we weren't publishing them on the same days even.
Yeah.
Because you could only publish it on Sundays, so she was publishing hers and I was publishing mine, and they were appearing side by side in the paper.
Oh, my
It was,
There were $6,000 just for our part alone.
For a small election.
Yes.
Well, Jennifer, if we're going to look at, the publication of these notices, like we're talking about here now, I agree with you. We need to be looking at all notices germane to
Right.
either the city or to the election cycle here ourselves. And if you did not include, for good reason, I'm sure, all of them, then that needs to be done so we can consider all of it
Yeah.
as a
And not-
package, so to speak, and make recommendations,
Sure.
would be my thing.
Yeah, I agree.
And if we want to focus on this as one of the
This
few,
may be
you
a
know,
bigger bag than we can do, by January,
yeah,
because it does involve
there's,
different parts of the law.
there's a lot on the list here, which is
Oh, yeah.
great. Excellent list, by the way, Jennifer, but I think we'll have to pick and choose what things we.
Yeah. Well, let's move on. Training.
But you will put together a
I'll
consolidated
go
list,
back
and we can
find
come
all
back
the-
and look
all
at it.
the postings, yeah. Training for poll workers is actually a new law that passed in 2019. I don't have the law cited here, but it requires us to train all poll workers that will work in an odd year. In the past, we just had to train the supervisor, but now we have to bring any poll worker that works in an odd year if it was past the year when they attended their original training,
Yeah,
which would be for the school election. We would have to bring all poll workers back in.
who are gonna work.
Trained, who are going to work, which is a cost to the county to do, and with them having just come off a general election year, is it necessary to bring all the poll workers back in where you could just train the supervisor? I mean, I don't know, I mean.
No, I mean, you know, I don't know. I like the idea personally, you know. I mean, if it's.
The idea to train them up.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, I mean, I do, I know you're doing the training, Jennifer, and you know, frankly, you know the ability level of the poll workers better than I do, but I think I see the appeal of training them every time, just to keep things fresh for folks, because if it's 2 years between some elections, 2 years that you're not trained, I mean, people aren't doing it that often, especially the ones who only work one day.
Don't you always, invite all the poll workers for refreshing
We do,
during,
yeah.
anytime during the year?
We do, and we do similar trainings. I just, if you were to have a countywide election and you were to have to bring all your poll
Oh,
workers
yeah.
back in an odd year,
Mm-hmm.
then that could be very costly to the county in addition. So those were just some kind of things, I had made note of
Sure.
that potentially, could cause issues.
Well, I think it's good you noted it. We're having the discussion. I think
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah. Okay, well, you've got something here, in the first item, which is 3,000 precinct limit. Are we changing that?
I think we should change that. It caused us to create an exact same precinct in the city of Prairie Grove. So now in Prairie Grove, we have Prairie Grove City 1 and Prairie Grove City 2 that are the exact same precinct. We had to split them because they reached the 3,000. Same thing in Farmington. Farmington City 1 and Farmington City 2 are the exact same precinct, but we had to split them because of the 3,000. I know Kim will definitely agree with me on this one.
Well, and it's not like you doubled the population, you didn't go to 6,000.
Yeah.
Change it,
Yeah.
with the
Yeah,
3,020.
Yeah.
So I think this law originated because candidates wanted smaller precinct lists to be able to
Right.
see how people voted. But with the whole state now being on the new system and with Central Point and the reports we can pull out of Central Point, I don't think that this 3,000 cap is necessary for candidates to be able to kind of view how voters are voting. It just creates more precincts that aren't necessary.
Sure.
As going into a redistricting year, the fewer the precincts we have, the better off we are, because that's fewer ballot styles,
Yep.
fewer mistakes that can be made, and when you randomly have to create a new precinct because it's hit an arbitrary number, I think that it is really an issue. So this has been on our list for many years,
Mhm.
for several years to change. It's never gone anywhere, but I think with redistricting, I think we can make
That
a
might be
push
the time
to say,
to
hey,
do it.
listen, we're getting ready to redraw all these lines, this law needs to just go
away.
away completely.
What was it before, the limit
There
on?
was no limit,
No limit.
there was no limit.
So you could have an unlimited number of people in a precinct? I mean, practically.
Right, which would mean their ballot style would all be the same, which is great when you're proofing, because the goal is to make sure every voter gets the correct ballot. The more precincts we have, the more ballot styles you have.
Would you have, so you would have to split a precinct in order to align with certain district lines or put a certain population in, with redistricting?
With redistricting, that's all going to happen. So what we don't want to happen is all these new precincts that we could create, we have to end up doing like Farmington, where you have Farmington 1 and Farmington 2, which are the exact same precinct, they just have more than 3,000 people in them. So I do think that this definitely is worth pursuing this
Sure.
of just taking the cap off the precinct.
So take it off completely.
Yes,
Let's see,
and we're voting countywide now.
that's true.
We do vote centers now too, and that makes it
See, so
different.
Yep,
Negates that.
sure. That's a good point, Bill.
All right, so,
Yep, you're right.
question. Are there going to be candidates, office holders who will fight this?
Oh, well, so this doesn't change their offices. All
No,
this
I
means-
understand that.
All this means is that instead of getting a precinct list of Farmington 1 and 2, they get just Farmington
One
1
list.
and has 6,000
Yeah,
people in it.
yeah.
Versus 2 lists of 3,000 people.
Mhm.
I mean, honestly, that's all that.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, when this law was instituted, and I don't know who was responsible for that, but when it was instituted, were the, office holders really high on it?
I don't know, I think it was one that just kind of slipped
Oh, it
through.
slipped through?
And it was a feel-good thing.
And we didn't do vote centers
Oh, that's
at the
true.
time.
Yeah.
And we
yeah.
didn't have we didn't have all the
Convenient for
tracking system.
the candidate
So
to look in more
the
detail
list
to
from the
his
county clerk's
potential
office was super
voters.
important on
Yeah.
where people
Yeah.
before
voted.
and after.
But
Yeah.
now.
So maybe there will be opposition for
There
that.
may
Well,
be.
I mean, that's what I'm asking.
But it could go
What
away, and the new ones.
is it worth pushing, or is there just no chance of it passing? That's what you're asking.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Sure.
Because I mean,
Sure.
you know, the office holders are often, protective of their
Yeah,
ground, and any changes, even if they don't change that ground, sometimes they're pretty sensitive
But
about
their
it.
Sure.
ground is getting ready to change. That's what I'm
Altogether,
saying.
that's true.
That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. This is the year to do it because
Yeah.
everybody's precincts are getting ready to change.
Right, right.
And so
Good
if we're
point.
going to clean it up,
You're right.
we need a year.
It's a good point.
We need a year to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, good. I mean, I think it's a good idea, but, it's always good to
well, it's worth,
know who would be against it.
Sure.
What do you say, Kim?
I definitely think it would be worth reaching out to maybe a few legislators and getting their feedback on whether or not they feel like this is a necessity anymore,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
because of our new system, that it could go away.
It's a good suggestion.
Yeah.
well, they know it's a one-year thing, it's a one-time thing.
Right,
New ones won't know about it, and the old ones
that's true, yeah,
will get over it.
yeah. Well, some of them don't get over anything, you know, so,
We'll
okay.
introduce them to their replacement.
Yeah, really. All right, poll watcher ID.
I think that poll watchers should be required to wear an ID inside the polling location. they come in, they present their document to the supervisor, and then they hang out at the polling place all day. Voters come in, other poll workers there, don't know who they are, what is their purpose there, what are they doing, why are they taking notes, why are they standing so close, all of that sort of thing. I think this would just be a simple thing to require the poll watchers to wear an ID, so that it's easy for people to know who that individual is. Our election officials wear an ID when they're at the polling location, so I think that.
Is this something that could be done, just on a county level?
I think your commissioners could dictate that.
That's what I'm thinking.
I don't know. I think there's a statutory process for the specific requirements for the poll watcher.
What about a poll
Yeah.
worker?
Well, for a poll worker too, you mean saying, hey, you have to wear this ID?
Well, all of ours, we provide and
Yeah.
mandate they wear an ID.
Possibly, but I think that there would be an argument from poll watchers that they don't have to
That
wear,
it's not,
because it's
specified
not
in the law.
statutorily specified. Because the process is very specific by statute for a poll watcher, right? I mean, Jennifer, when you read it, it really says what you have to do, how you have to do it. Probably not. It'd probably be looked on as arguably as an additional requirement the county was putting on poll watchers. I think it's a good idea. I mean,
Well, it's a win-win, in my opinion, really, if you think about it, Max. It's better for them, because then there's no question of who they are and why they're there.
Yeah.
So they don't get any heat, or they don't get questioned, or they don't get challenged for some reason that's unrealistic. All right? And by the same token, it's good for the public, because then they know that they're officially there for an official duty.
that's true, yeah.
So I don't see any downside to either one of them,
I agree.
but
But I guess
it gives us better
I
control of the
feel
fight.
like we could take that in our own hands, but if we can't,
Well, let's look into it.
I don't know that we could. I don't think we could.
And the law that I've got quoted there is the requirement that the poll watcher is required to do when they go to the poll.
Yeah,
Is that they have to present that the election
To the
official, and
supervisor.
that's all they have to do.
yeah, I was gonna say, I hadn't looked at the law in a while, but thank you.
Yeah, that's.
It's right
yeah,
here,
it's right.
yeah.
But how
Okay.
does the voter know that they're there and who they are and why they're there?
That's why I think
They
they
don't.
have to wear. And I think it's an easy enough process, because every poll watcher has to come to the county clerk's office to get that document marked by the county clerk, which means that as they get their document stamped, the clerk will provide them for our clerk. We will provide them for our county clerk, but as they get their form stamped, they get their ID handed to them. It's an easy,
Yeah,
they
that's
have to
easy.
visit the county clerk's office, so you
Right.
can't say that that the paperwork isn't coming in.
Good one.
I mean, I think it's a great idea, then it would be clear to everybody and very official.
And if they're not wearing, I mean, am I saying, I'm telling what the law ought to be, that if they're not wearing it, they're not allowed to
They're not allowed to be
be
in
in
the,
the polling place.
right, because if that document's not signed by the clerk and they don't have it, they're not allowed to be in the
Right.
polling location.
Currently, yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, let's
This would
move
be a
on.
year to address it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, unopposed candidate.
So I think this law passed in 2020 and had us put unopposed candidates, back on the ballot. I think we need to make a push to take them off. It was confusing to voters. I don't know how helpful it was. For the primary, it caused us a lot more scrutiny than we had to do. And I don't know if it'll go anywhere, but I do think that it's worthwhile taking a look at.
I agree substantively, but I tried pretty hard to, oppose that bill last time, and I know you guys did too, adding opposed candidates to the ballot, and it passed overwhelmingly, so I don't think we're going back on it. I don't think we're going back.
And I mean, that's the problem with something that gets passed last year, we're gonna pay the penalty of the mistake there. Okay, ballot order.
So, this we experienced this year, and several people, when they called in to complain about the way the names of the presidential candidates, would say, in this state, it's done this way. And so I don't know if it's worth pursuing I just put it on here because I knew that we had had suggestions for this and complaints about that, to list the two main parties first, or if you wanted to say the parties that the state recognizes. If you wanted to say the state recognizes right now the Green Party and the Libertarian Party and the Democratic and Republican Party. Those are the four parties that the state would allow primaries for, or they have conventions for. You could even expand it to that.
I don't like the idea of messing with the ballot draw, but what I think the resolution for that issue is for the state to look at raising the requirements for presidential
Yes.
candidates to get on the
Yes.
ballot.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the way you would address
I kind of feel
that
like
issue.
somebody might be working on that right now, because I heard a lot of feedback. Why do we have so many candidates on there? Shouldn't it be harder to get your name on the ballot?
Sure.
So, I mean, I don't know, that's probably not one that we're gonna
You know,
really
the same
pursue.
thing, we had the last two presidential elections were kind of a whole lot alike. We had a lot of Republicans, you know, in
In the
16,
primaries, yeah.
and then we had a lot of Democrats in 20. So I think it's an isolated situation. It only comes along once in a blue moon. But I do think that there may need to be some recertification or looking at how you get your name on it as a presidential candidate. You know, presidential candidate. I don't disagree with that, but I don't see it being an every 4-year issue,
Yeah, maybe not.
because how many times are we gonna have these kinds of primaries where you have 16 candidates on each?
Well, we had it
deal.
in 2016 too.
Well, we did.
But we got lucky and both main candidates were on the front page.
This is just for the general though, not the.
Yeah.
Yeah, not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's my question. You're telling me that the, state only recognizes 4, parties?
You can register, when you register to vote, you can register as a Libertarian, Green Party, Republican, Democrat, or optional. And those are the only two parties right now that could potentially have a primary. They don't always meet that threshold to have a primary.
Okay, then why did we get all those extra candidates on the general?
Because those are candidates who filed, but like, for instance, if you wanted to register to vote as one of those parties, you couldn't necessarily register to vote as that party
Oh, okay.
here.
So there's actually a difference between parties that the state recognizes and how, I mean, I guess, I have to presume there's no limit on the number of candidates that can get on a party and can say, I'm with the Washington County meeting party.
And when I say that they recognize, it has more to do with the ability to have a primary than anything. And that's what it is, they, you know, having that ability to have a primary election. Because back in 2012, I think it was the first year we ever had a primary for the Green Party.
Right.
And we had 4 ballot styles.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, well, that's gonna be interesting in the future. All right, let's go on to election day, candidate filing period.
this is one where I think it needs to be cleaned up. For the general election, the school board candidates filed 2 days, started filing 2 days before the municipal candidates started filing. It's confusing.
Yep.
It needs to be gone through so that filing periods are the same. Our Beaver Water District filed like at a really oddball time. And so I think that candidate filing periods should be consistent, for both primary and the general election, because it's confusing to candidates and, you know, to everyone else looking to see who's going to be on the ballot.
Yeah. And here again, we've got a couple different parts of the code that
One
have
is
to
the,
be dealt with.
right, because one is the school part, the other one is for municipal part. And this has to do with that combination of combining the school with the general election, and not all of the pieces of the law were updated.
Right.
Seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Make the candidate filing periods consistent for different offices, right?
Yeah.
Legislators who take the lead on this and work together on it should work very closely with the subcommittee of the legislature who deals with election law
Yeah.
for these simple deals like this. That ought to be a committee deal and done.
Yeah.
You know, so,
Yeah, you're right.
you know,
Yeah.
that's the way I think so much of this could be handled.
Right.
Yeah, I agree, Bill.
I have a subcommittee.
Mhm.
How many of these things that you've got under election dates would be, resolved if the calendar were somehow,
Okay.
yeah.
That's a whole other, I almost feel like the election date, that needs to be a whole other discussion. Because certain things have to happen if we're going to do a consolidated election calendar.
Okay.
So the first thing that would need to be decided, I think, is do we have the election in May
Right.
one year and March the next year?
Right.
Because that determines, you know.
Everything else.
So I almost feel like these can be put aside to kind of see where, I mean, where bills start to be filed. But what happens is a bill is filed and passes, and then another one comes along that maybe sounds better, but you've already got this other one going.
And that
so-
happened a couple of years ago.
Yeah, so I do think that that is something that needs to be looked at, maybe not this meeting, just because we have so much time, we don't have as much time.
Right.
Okay.
Well, that's, I mean, I am with you. I think that the legislature needs to determine, are we gonna continue with the March, May, or are we gonna go to one or the other? And I don't know what the, attitude is down there.
If they don't change the March and May, and they go to a consolidated election schedule, that consolidated election schedule most likely will be only an election in the month that general or primary is held.
Okay.
The state board is pushing for, 4 elections per year, and
The quarterly thing.
the quarterly thing, but that's gonna take a lot of work to look at changing that March and May thing. That messes everything up.
Yeah. Wow, okay, well, let's go on, runoff timeframe.
I think a 5-week runoff time period, I know they changed the law recently to give us a 4-week runoff, but it puts us always of having early votes the week of Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
or early, or, yeah, right around that time frame. And with the continued, if we have a continued increase in absentee voting and provisional ballots like we had, it was really hard to get everything done to make sure your first election was certified before you needed to start creating ballots. And so a 5-week runoff would put us, and I went forward in the calendar a lot of years, would put us at always typically having early votes the first week of December. Election day would be the second Tuesday in December, and then we would be certifying the election this Friday. So it would always.
Before Christmas.
We would always be done before Christmas. So a 5-week calendar, a 5-week runoff period, I really think would work. 6 weeks won't, but a 5-week one would definitely be worth pushing.
And that's kind of a small change, but I guess the question is, you think they're inclined to return to this, I mean, to return to the item when they just changed that?
I think they would be. This typically only impacts municipal elections. And so municipal, and candidates don't take office until January 1st. So we would be finished with everything by January 1st. For the primary, it just gives you that much more time to prepare it. For primary, we're more likely to have a countywide election because, you have like governors up and lieutenant governors, where if you have a runoff election, that's going to be a countywide election. So that actually benefits us for the primary, it gives us another full week to be able to prep for a countywide runoff election.
Okay, so I've been thinking in terms of the fall election, but you're saying it would enhance things in the spring as well.
when you're more likely to have a countywide
Yeah.
runoff, definitely.
Okay.
And they then don't go back on the ballot until November anyway, so like, why not? You know, there isn't a rush to have it over with in 4 weeks.
Yeah, good point. Okay. Okay, questions, comments?
Makes sense to me.
It does. Okay, dates for special elections.
This all has to do with that consolidated calendar, just like before.
Oh, okay.
So that's all kind of, this whole page could all be
Yeah.
lumped together.
Okay.
It's up in the air until we
Yeah.
get.
And that, I mean, and I'm just gonna say it, that's outside our control,
Yeah.
you know? Seems like,
But if we could make some of these, early changes, then that would certainly help with the rest of this.
Very
Sure.
beneficial.
Yeah. Okay, absentee voting. Dates for picking up absentee ballots.
So there are two different, well, okay. So absentee ballots, once absentee ballots are ready, there is no specific date when in-person can pick up an absentee ballot. So absentee ballots are due in the county clerk's office 47 days before an election, and then she is to start mailing them 46 days before the election, which technically means a voter could come in on the 46th day and pick up an absentee ballot, while the clerk is trying to get them prepped and ready and out the door to all the voters. If you are a designated bearer, you cannot pick up an absentee ballot for an individual until 15 days before the election or 7 days before the election. It has to do with the start of early vote, so that depends on if it's a primary or a regular election. I think that the law needs to specify a start date of when individuals can pick up an absentee ballot in person. I don't think it needs to be 46 days before the election, because the clerk is trying to get
on.
ballots mailed out. But since there is no specific date in there, anyone, and they did, starts coming in to pick
That
up
early,
ballots. So I don't know, I'm not saying for the commission a specific date, but I do think that a date needs to be decided, but I think it needs to be the same date as a designated bearer. Like, I think having this distinction between in-person and designated bearer is very confusing for voters. And so whatever the date is, it needs to be the same.
Consistent.
Yes.
well, I agree, and that's the one of the other ones you note here, the date for returning the ballot is different for
Yes.
in-person voters with,
Yes.
and designated bearers. That's confusing. I mean, that's confusing
Why?
to the voters. Why? Why have a different date, Bill? I agree.
Well,
I agree with both of those. They should be the same.
yeah, the interesting thing about that is, I'm sure there are people who get confused, well, what date am I supposed to come? Since they're different.
Well, sure, yeah. And when they're
And
that
we're not
different.
paying close attention to it at that point anyway.
So
Yep.
I think that,
Consistency is what you're looking for.
yeah, if
Yeah.
it's 30 days before the election, which would give the clerk
Yeah,
time
yeah.
it would give the clerk time to get all the ballots mailed out that she needs to be, I mean, I know she's still getting applications in and they're still doing it, but at least it gives her a time frame of, okay, this is the date when people are gonna start coming in to pick up ballots, and go ahead and change that designated bearer to the same
Sure.
day as in person.
I think it's a good suggestion. 30
So-
days seems good to me.
The only thing with the 30-day is that that's the last day of voter registration. But I don't know, I mean, it's gotta be 30 days, kind of puts all deadlines kind of the same.
But I don't know that that's
makes
all
it
bad.
consistent. No, I'm just saying that's
It's
another
consistent.
workload
Yeah, good-
day that the
that's-
clerk has.
Good point, Bill.
Yeah.
It might be a good idea to just have it 30 days for everything at that point, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a whole lot clearer if you say 30 days, register, pick up your ballot, whatever.
Yep,
Makes
yep,
it consistent
you're right.
message.
Well, then all public notices make it very simple too.
That's true, yeah.
Think about that, and then that's where the general public gets most of their information there.
Yeah.
So if you're consistent with all three,
Yep. Consistency, less room for error for
Yeah.
everyone, on
Exactly.
all sides.
If you've got it clear, then it's right there.
well, you know, if it's convoluted, that and we struggle with it. The
Yeah.
the
The
county
public
clerk's
is gonna do
office
it.
struggles with it, trying to deal with these dates.
Right.
It's gotta be confusing,
Sure,
you know?
yeah, definitely.
So essentially, in all of these points, you're saying consistency is the most important thing in the absentee voting at this point.
Yes.
Getting the dates right, getting the requirements right, and, I mean, that certainly is gonna serve the voters better than, things in different slots. Okay, I think we can go on from that. Constitutional changes.
You
want more?
No,
You
there's
got
some
more?
more, yeah, in the absentee stuff.
Okay.
The, applications by mail, and you may agree or
up
disagree
here.
with me about
Okay.
this, but the last day for someone to turn in an application to have a ballot mailed
This
to
is
them is 7 days before the election.
Application for an absentee
For an
ballot.
absentee ballot.
Okay.
However, that really does not benefit the voter, because let's say you turn it in on the last day. The clerk doesn't get a chance to process it until the next day, so that's Wednesday. And then Thursday, it goes out, or it goes out late Wednesday afternoon, let's say you live in New York City. So then it's mailed Thursday. So you might get it Saturday. Then you're gonna have to mail it Saturday. And it might, even in a year that's not like this, it might get back to the county clerk on Tuesday. So honestly, the 7 days, even though the idea, I think, is to give voters plenty of time to be able to request a ballot be mailed to them, really does them a disservice.
Yeah.
Unless you are here local in Fayetteville, but even with that, there's no guarantee.
Right.
It still goes to Little Rock.
Exactly.
All your mail mailed here, used to it'd go to Springdale, the next morning they'd have it.
Right.
Everything goes to Little Rock now.
Does it really?
It doesn't matter if it's across the street from the post office, call your drug.
Yeah.
That mail would go to Little Rock and then back.
No kidding.
Yes, sir.
I didn't know that.
That's been done, that was done several years ago.
Yeah.
5, 6, 7, 8 years ago.
Well,
Wow.
that didn't even go down to Fort Smith for a while.
Well, it did for a while, yeah. But that was the distribution center change.
Gotcha.
It's crazy,
Yeah, that is crazy.
absolutely crazy.
Yeah,
How can you justify that kind
Seems
of
like a waste of
transportation?
resources.
Yeah.
I agree with
the
you.
cost
So
to
when
do that?
Yeah, exactly.
When you say on your
Monetary,
sheet, your
environmental, all of it.
applications by mail change from 7 days to the first day of early voting, that's the change you would recommend.
Because what it does is, for a general and a primary, it sits it at 15 days, so the deadline would be 15 days.
It basically doubles it.
Exactly. But for a special election,
Oh,
when you
yeah.
typically
Yeah.
won't have someone from out of state requesting an absentee ballot, you could leave it at the 7 days, or you could just put it at 15
Well, that's
days
what I
and
was-
just keep it at 15 days.
Yeah.
Which is fine with me. Part of me wonders if when this law was originally written, because we used to just have 1 week of early vote. And the law was written that it was the first day of early vote was the deadline to request an absentee ballot.
Yeah.
And then it just never got adjusted, and nobody paid attention to it, and it just never got changed, and so that's why I was saying early voting. But you could just make it consistent and just say 15 days is the deadline,
Yeah.
because honestly, this law does a disservice to the voter.
How many people turned in, how many ballots did we get Wednesday and Thursday after the deadline on Tuesday?
Okay.
Like
For the-
how many do we know?
I
Just
don't
like,
know, I've got quite a few, I mean, a big stack of them that we have, and. I will-
dozens or hundreds?
No, not 100, not hundreds,
Okay.
but yeah,
That's
dozens. So, yeah, and then for the runoff election,
Yeah,
because the runoff runs into that 4-week time period instead of 5 weeks. For the runoff election, I have twice as many that were returned after the deadline.
So, if the runoff, if you were on a 15-day, excuse me, that's not gonna, press you on other things?
No.
But if we do the 5 weeks instead of the 4?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So you could just change this to 15 days before the election.
Yeah, okay.
Or you could change it to 10. I hate to move any deadlines to limit voters' ability to be able to request an absentee ballot and vote before an election. But the flip side, I do see, if you say it's 7-day cutoff, there creates an expectation for the voters that that's a sufficient amount of time for them to get the ballot and then be able to return it.
Yeah.
So I get it. I don't know if I would go straight up to 15.
The 10,
Because people, you know, I don't know. What about 10?
okay, so the 10 is the deadline we had for this runoff election. And that's the election where we just mailed ballots to Fayetteville and Springdale, and I've got stacks of them back.
Yeah, but those people all got ballots. They weren't submitting applications. They were already on the list.
Right, but they all
Right.
got, their ballots weren't mailed until 10 days before the election, which means that they didn't get their ballot back. They got their ballot and then mailed it back, and it didn't get back to us in time, and that was just Fayetteville and Springdale.
Aren't these those two separate deadlines? Aren't we talking about the deadline by which you have to request an absentee ballot?
I am, but
And then
I'm talking
that's
about,
the mail deadline.
right, but
Whenever,
practicality-wise, that's why I'm saying the 10 days, that's when we got a lot of them didn't return in time.
The point is, you're trying to be sure
I see your point.
that ballot gets through the cycle, the logistics of picking it up, getting it voted and getting it back and counted, is fair to the voter. If 15 days is more fair and more likely to get 100% of those votes counted, 5 days, one way or another, or would not matter to me as a voter. I would rather opt on the 15-day time to give my ballot a time to go through the process.
But as a voter, you're gonna be submitting your application 45 days, 50 days. You're gonna be ahead of the curve on
You very
when you're
well be,
submitting
but
it to.
there's still that same logistical problem. The longer you wait, the more severe it becomes.
I guess the flip side is that the risk is on the voter if
It
they,
is, and I'm for voter responsibility, there's no doubt about it. But by the same token, I want to be realistic, because there's one thing that the voter has absolutely no control over: the mail. If they're gonna do a mail-in,
it's true.
I mean, they're dead in the water once they put the stamp on it.
Yep,
Yeah.
you're right.
That's the point I'm making. I don't care if they have 3 days to do it, or 7 days, or you're 10 or 15. I don't care personally, because I don't vote that way.
Right.
But if you're gonna choose to vote that way, you better get the logistics in your favor
Well, and
if you wanna be successful.
it simply is allowing the voter, the absentee voter, a little bit more of an edge,
Yes.
whether they decide to take it or not. They can't blame us because it wasn't,
Because the deadline was too short.
And it doesn't do any good to fuss with
right,
the mail system.
yeah,
Can I give you an example?
go.
I had one that was actually in New York, that they paid $36 to have it overnighted, so that it would be there on Monday, to make sure it was counted. It did not show up in the county clerk's office until Wednesday.
Wow. Can they overnight? Is that that's an acceptable form?
Well, wait,
We ended
they
up
did not have
telling, we ended up telling people, you're gonna have to FedEx your ballot back.
But was that the postal service overnight?
Mm-hmm.
Because that one, I mean, I believe they put up a disclaimer that says something to the effect of, we try, but we don't always get it on the date that we promised you.
Yeah.
But they'll take your money.
That's way off.
I mean, you saw where it was guaranteed delivery by this date, and they wrote in the date that it was guaranteed by, and it showed up 2 days after.
2 days later, wow.
Bad. Wow. Well,
So
It happens.
therefore, you cannot trust the mail system.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the point. If you're gonna do mail-in ballots,
We have a reporter here.
you better take advantage of the opportunity you have time-wise to be safe in your logistical side of it.
And it sounds like most people did. Frankly, I'm impressed we had got less than 100 ballots returned after the deadline. I think that's terrific, you know, I hate that we got any ballots after it,
Right,
but based
right.
on the number of people who voted absentee, I feel like that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay, what else you got on this?
The next one would be the different date for returning in person as designated bearer. That needs to be the same.
That's the same thing as
Yeah.
It
previous.
needs to be the
Yeah.
day
Yeah.
before the election,
Yeah.
not the day of.
Okay.
Then the next category refers to when we cannot count an absentee ballot. Is there any other recourse for us to provide voters to be able to cure their absentee ballots, for the term? So for instance, signatures, address, and date of birth are all compared to the voter statement and the voter application. Is there a way for us to compare the signature to the ID that they return to us? Or their voter registration card. Is there a mechanism where we could look at a different piece of paper or different documents that they submitted that would give us the authority to be able to count their ballot whenever there is a lack of comparison between the two different statements, or the two different pieces of paper, basically? Okay.
All right, your thoughts?
I'll adopt and restate all my comments from previous meetings. These guys have heard me talk about it every time, Kim. I think that the signature law is an outdated, archaic, and useless requirement under the Arkansas Code. The reason for the signature requirement was to help verify a voter's identity when they cast an absentee ballot, because you compare one signature versus the other signature. But after that, we've since adopted voter ID, so voters have to return a copy of their ID. That is the verification piece. So I don't think we should be in the business of comparing signatures when a voter returns a copy of an ID. If you want to still do that for somebody who doesn't return a copy of the ID and just signs the verification or something like that, I mean, I can see how you get there on that. But I don't think there should be a voter ID comparison requirement for absentee ballots if you return a copy of the driver's license.
Okay. And so that would need to be a legislative change.
Yeah.
And so and you could follow through with that with your address and date of birth, because look at all the ones we couldn't count because they wrote their date of birth down wrong. They wrote the year 2020 instead of the year they were born.
Or they wrote they were born in, 1918 and it was 1919 and
Right.
you can't count it.
But if you had their ID that they returned, could you look at their ID? So all those things
Yeah.
would have to be a legislative change.
Yeah.
Also included in that too is when their voter statement is not returned with their absentee ballot. We had several people who tried to mail in their voter statements because they mailed their application, they mailed everything in, and then they looked down on their desk and there was their voter statement.
And it was too late.
And it's too late.
And didn't one of them even come up and try to return it?
They did, they tried to return it, they mailed it in, they said, so those are all set aside. Is there a way for us, if they return it, for us to put that voter statement with the ones that are missing? So
Sort of
all
a cure period till that next Monday or something.
Right, all of those would be legislative changes that would have to be made, so.
Well,
What do you guys think about those?
we'll have to look at it,
Yeah, I'd like to see, I need to reread that law because, this is a hard one. I don't know that they weren't thinking about some of these things when they, remember how the voter ID got adopted and then rescinded and returned and all of that. And I think that in portions, it hasn't, it's too hit and miss. And, I think it needs to be revisited in a way that is cohesive. And a big part of that is the cure if something is missing. So, I'd like to see that be a primary issue. If it will be, who knows? but I'd like to see.
But
it
at least we
addressed.
can give the legislature an opportunity to take another look at it.
Now,
Sure, and suggest it, because I think it's a good point, Renee, that this was other issues in the law was the last thing on their
Right.
mind when they passed
Right.
voter ID,
Yeah.
and,
yeah.
I mean, making it sync up with other parts of the election code. You're right.
Well, and my question is, how is the SVEC resolved on this issue? Is this something they're looking at?
The only two things that, and this was just the one meeting I listened to, the only two things that they were looking at the time was the consolidated calendar and the 70-day filing period, which goes in with that consolidated count. They didn't talk about any of this, because those are substantive changes. They really only will look at logistical type of changes. They, because it's just kind of a political, on
you're right.
how you wanna look
Yeah.
at it, it can be political. And so they typically won't look at something that is gonna be a political issue. And so
I just feel like this has been such a big one since we first started doing it, that it seems to me somebody ought to take this bull by the horn.
I agree, it's been an issue for years that we've dealt with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyway, all right, well, hopefully you've got processing absentee ballots. Did you say something about that?
That would be to go ahead and make that legislative change to let us process absentee ballots the first day of early vote. So for a primary, general, it would give us 2 weeks. For a special, it would give us 1 week, which would be plenty of time.
Okay, constitutional changes.
So,
How are we doing on time, by the way? Have we?
I don't know, looks like it's still going.
Okay, well,
all right.
Maybe the other one canceled or something, and it,
oh, that could be,
Finished
yeah.
early?
finished early, yeah.
Okay, constitutional.
So some of these, when I say they're constitutional, there is a way to change the Constitution, I know, with like a supermajority vote. Some
Yeah.
of these might fall into that category, but some of them might not. And I don't know enough about these particular laws to know which ones would and which ones would not. The type of ID is accepted, of course, that's laid out in our Constitution now. Currently, we do not accept tribal ID as an accepted form of ID. And I've given you a little kind of summary of a conversation that I had with the state board about tribal IDs, kind of what other states do about tribal IDs. We have more and more people who have a tribal ID now, especially in counties that border Oklahoma. If we have more casinos move in, we'll see more voters who have tribal IDs. I do think that it's definitely worthwhile for us to pursue, because I do think that it should be an accepted form of ID. And so that would be one change to the ID law. The other one is, we see it a lot when we do provisional ballots. A lot of the provisional ballots that are cast because voters don't have ID, it's because they don't have an Arkansas driver's license. And it's not that they don't have an ID, it's they have an ID from another state. And so we end up doing provisionals that end up counting because they are registered to vote, but it's just simply they don't have an Arkansas driver's license. I don't know if that's something, worth pursuing for the commission but I know that we see this quite a bit on election day. I know that a House bill was just filed that would change registering your car tags from 30 days to 60 days, which is typically when people get a new driver's license. And then that kind of messes with the 30 days to register to vote. So people then that will push more people to not having an Arkansas driver's license, because if they're not changing their car tags until
For that much
60 days.
longer,
Exactly.
I see.
So I just, that one just kind of popped up, and I thought, well, that could impact us in a way that we didn't think about. So that would definitely, I think, possibly have to be a constitutional change. I have no idea.
I think you're right that that supermajority, whatever it is it 2/3?
I think so, yes.
For under the election part of the Constitution? I'm just trying to remember, I think it might be. But I think they can change it based on that. I agree with the tribal IDs one strongly. I mean, what do we do in Washington County? The law is up to interpretation, right?
No.
I think.
Only if you're really doing it.
Listen to you.
From the United States, the way I look at it is that, and it's partly in light of U.S. Supreme Court's McGirt decision, which you guys know about, and the sovereignty of Native American tribes, which is a big deal.
Especially if you are a member of one of those tribes.
Yeah, exactly. That's a
big deal.
Those are sovereign nations. Within the continental United States, but they're sovereign nations.
Sure they are.
From the legal perspective, and an ID issued by a sovereign federal nation should be counted by us in Arkansas as an acceptable form of ID. I sure think that this is one that's worth pursuing, to ask the legislature to change. I don't see any good reason not to do that. Did they actually consider that when they were drafting voter ID? I don't know, but they might not have, and I kind of think it was an oversight, and we ought to push to get it changed this time around.
Okay, curiosity. How many tribal IDs did we have to deal with this time? Do you know?
So I don't know, from the very beginning, when this law changed for voter ID, we had two of our poll workers, who are supervisors, who have tribal IDs. And they asked the question from day one, would their ID be an accepted form of ID?
Right.
So, for us, we've had that question asked. Now, are we seeing it at the polling location with people showing their IDs? I don't know, and I don't have records of that, but I do know enough that we had poll workers who have tribal IDs who asked the question, would this be an accepted form of ID? Because they're going through, when we're doing training, we're going through all the different types of IDs. The other one that's come up, the marijuana ID card, that was a new one this year.
Yep.
That is accepted because it's
Oh,
issued by the state.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
So we get those questions each year of what types of ID are accepted. And tribal ID has been on the list of questions that they've had each year.
Jennifer, correct me if I'm wrong, but other counties, specifically, I know one, Sebastian County, get more tribal IDs than we do, and they do not accept those in that county, right?
Yeah, they don't.
So, it's a statewide issue. It affects folks all over the state.
So that kind of leads me to a second question. Did our poll workers have an Arkansas driver's license?
Well, they did.
Sure.
Okay, so they had an alternative.
He has several. He has military ID, he has.
Oh, right,
concealed carry,
Yeah.
he has several. But that doesn't mean that everyone would
you're
have
right.
all of those.
You're right.
But he was just kind of going through the IDs, and because he has that, he asked, would that be an accepted form of ID?
Right, okay, okay.
Well,
Satisfy my curiosity.
I sure think it should. The out-of-state IDs, I don't know, what do you guys think about the
What do other states do on that?
I don't know. What do you, and I see,
You agree.
They
do.
go ahead
Oh, there's a laundry list.
accept them?
There's a laundry list of states already that accept it, period.
for the tribal IDs,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree.
What?
That's
I could have saved myself 450 plus provisional ballots if we wouldn't have had to have them fill those out just because of out-of-state ID.
Oh, is that many out-of-state IDs?
450.
Just in Benton County?
Just in Benton County.
Wow, Kim.
Because of out-of-state ID.
Well, and that makes sense, because you do have a lot of people coming in from other states.
Here's a nice list, Jennifer, of the state governments that accept tribal IDs. That's a pretty big list. We ought to join the club. I think that one's clear. I would accept out-of-state IDs too.
If you're just verifying the photo to verify it's that person, that photo's not gonna change from an out-of-state to an Arkansas state, in my opinion.
Well, it's a great point, Kim, because that's what the purpose of the ID is, just to verify the photo. That's the only purpose of it, just the photo.
You're not verifying anything else on there.
Yeah, I trust Texas, to have an approved government ID that shows a picture of a photo.
Well, and they're enhanced driver's license now.
Please
That's
don't.
right. If you think about, most states are going to the enhanced driver's license.
Yep.
Which means that they had to
show an additional form of ID to get that driver's license too. So,
It's a great point.
I do think, you know, I know Kim had a lot more than we did, but I would guarantee you that most of ours for, that didn't have ID, it's not because the people are not showing ID, it's because they have an out-of-state driver's license.
Okay, anything else on that?
No, but I, propose that we ask the legislature to change both of those things. I mean, that
The
we.
out-of-state and the tribal?
Yeah, both of them at the same time, because they both, make sense. And I think if you're amending the Constitution, if you're gonna take a shot to do that,
Gotta do it right.
why not, if you're going for a supermajority, would you guys support that? I mean, for those two things?
Oh, I think that they really should, whoever, and however we take the lead on this thing.
Well, I'd like to, actually talk to some of these folks that are,
Legislators?
to some of the people, like some of your 450 people that had to do provisionals. Why don't they have an Arkansas license or, driver's
A
license?
lot of times they move here temporarily with Walmart vendors and whatnot.
Yeah,
And so,
so they don't change it.
exactly, because they're just here for 6 months, 8 months, a year at the max, and they know that they're gonna be moving somewhere else. So they're not gonna take the time and the money to change their ID
Yeah.
from their permanent residence elsewhere just to satisfy an election law.
So,
Sure.
are we issuing, IDs that are not driver's, do we do that in the state anymore? Because I know
We
it's,
do in the clerk's
okay.
office, but.
So can you get an ID like that for purposes, still use your own driver's license from another state, but, have an ID that you can use for things like voting?
Why do I have to do that, though? I just shed 4 forms of ID to Texas to get my enhanced driver's license, I mean, that's a much stronger requirement, frankly, than, what they're gonna give you up there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm just thinking, are there alternative means to address this issue?
Not that I think are worthwhile. I mean, people have the ID, it's a verified government ID. I don't think it makes sense to make it Arkansas limited.
And I will tell you, people do not go and get that free ID. I think in
Yeah.
a year she's had it.
Yeah, it
If
became
she's-
pretty
if she's-
irrelevant.
If she's issued 10, I
Yeah.
would be surprised.
Yeah.
And what does she require in order to issue that?
They require almost the same type of documents that you have to provide
Wow.
to show to get an ID at the DMV. The only difference is it's free, but the
Right.
sad thing is, you get all that information together, and then that ID clearly says it's only for voting purposes. So if the voter's thinking they're getting a free ID to be able to, use at the doctor's office or use elsewhere,
Oh, it can't?
use even
No.
though it says on that ID that it can't be used for any other
I
purpose.
didn't know
but
that.
voting.
Well, I'd like to think of this a little more and read through some of the stuff on it. So I'm not prepared to go forward with it. Sorry.
I'm gonna take it and run with it.
Go for it.
I'm gonna get people to try to sponsor a bill to change it.
That's your prerogative.
On the
Yeah.
tribal IDs piece specifically.
Yeah.
Because I feel strongly about it. I mean, for Native people who have an ID from a tribal government, I think the state of Arkansas should recognize it as a acceptable form of
Do we have any,
voter verification.
do we have any, Indian land in Arkansas?
We don't, but I think you may have more people move
Right,
here for
right.
work. And the difference, the language would have to be, because I have it in here, to change the language, all you would have to change it to is to say issued by a federally recognized Native American
Oh,
tribe.
right.
So it is still a federally recognized. So it couldn't be that I've just made up an Indian tribe and I'm issuing IDs to people. it still has to fall into that category of being federally recognized, which makes it, which makes it stronger in the fact that it's not just anyone can say, well, here, I'm issuing ID.
I
They're
just
federally
founded my
recognized.
tribe.
Exactly, these are federally recognized, tribes.
Yeah.
That's what I said about the interpretation. I think there's a legal argument that currently the law does allow us to accept those, because it says
Oh, yeah.
issued by the United States, and if you're talking in Department of Interior recognizing a federal tribe, and I think there,
It's not issuing.
yeah, but
That's
there's,
different.
but there's still a legal argument there that it's an accepted anyway.
Maybe it needs to be tested in court.
Well, it probably does, but maybe the legislature should just clean it up, and it'd be a lot easier for all of us.
They're not real good at cleaning up, as you well know. All right, school millage.
So this is on my list every year. School millage. The fact we vote on it, even if it doesn't change, it's a constitutional, I don't know that this can be changed by the supermajority, I don't know, but, I mean, if anyone ever wanted to take it up, I think it would be worthwhile, for two reasons. One, voting on it every year when it doesn't change is just confusing to voters.
Yeah.
Voters who typically don't vote in school elections,
Right.
now will find it on their general and their primary ballot, and it's confusing. It looks like there's a new tax on your ballot.
And even if you vote against it, it doesn't make any difference.
It doesn't make any difference, it
Yeah.
stays the same. The other part is, it requires us to have a school election every year, which means that candidates who run in a general or a primary election year have to run to a bigger audience, basically. So I am now having to campaign to 90,000 voters, I
Right.
mean, because that's how many people voted, versus if I run in an odd year, I only have to campaign to 100 voters.
Yeah.
So it kind of gives a disadvantage to the school board members who run in an even year.
Yeah.
Those odd year ones, that's the year I would want to
Yeah.
run, because, probably no one's gonna
100
file, or
friends
no
would be-
Yeah, sure.
no voter interest. And so, if we were able to change the school millage, then, or maybe there just needs to be a change that requires school board members to run every 2 years. I don't know why they run every year, and that could be something to look at, but I do think definitely,
Are they staggered?
they do
Some of
staggered
them are,
terms, and
yeah.
I think they run every year because the school millage is on the ballot every year, so there has to be an election, so you don't skip a year, basically, is why it's done that way, but it's on my list every year, and so now, with us having the combined school election with the general and the primary, it does do a disadvantage to those.
While we're at it, can we get it on one ballot or the other and not either or? I mean,
I think we've already fought that one.
it drives me crazy.
I know,
think the
I know.
school board
I-
did not go for
Yeah.
that, I
Did they
think
not?
that, yeah, I think that's why they didn't
Mhm.
make a decision,
Yeah.
I think the school fought against that,
Yeah.
so.
Unfortunately, but they have their reason.
They don't have to run the election.
Yeah. Okay, voter registration list.
So this is I think this is a very old law, and I
Oh,
think
it's
this one can be
antiquated.
changed by a supermajority. We are required to post a list of every registered voter at all of our polling locations. Just so
Now
someone
it's
can look
countywide,
at it.
isn't it?
And now it's countywide, because we need vote centers. In the
Yeah.
past,
Yeah.
when you counted at the polling location, and when only one precinct voted there, it was a way for people to see
Right.
who was in that precinct. But now, we have tablets, but we have to do that for 130,000. No one
Ever
ever
looked at it,
looks
yeah.
at it. I don't know that it's of a value anymore to anyone. But, it's just one of those other requirements that if you don't do,
Somebody's gonna
someone's gonna
complain.
say you didn't comply with the law.
Right.
And so I do think this is one that definitely,
And who knows, Chris Morgan might be there and say, hey,
we didn't do it.
Yeah, that's
So,
true.
yeah.
Well, let me ask you this, and I don't know if we've talked about this before or not, but could you satisfy the requirement in the law by providing an iPad with all of the names on it. Have we done that?
That's what we do.
Okay, we're doing that
We took the
now.
old oh yeah, because the first year I did it,
Oh,
it
yeah.
cost me almost $2,000 or $3,000 to print
Yeah,
the list
right.
to take to the polling location.
Okay, yeah.
So
Wow.
we used the EA tablets. I think Kim from day one, she purchased really cheap, like the Kindle Fire.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And
Good
so-
call.
And did
So-
anybody even look at those?
They don't even know what they're for.
Yeah.
Well, they don't know what it is.
Let's do with this all the time.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Did anybody look at ours?
No.
No.
I've never seen
So it's
anyone.
really not just antiquated,
No.
it is irrelevant.
And I will tell you, in fact, up until 4 years ago, this wasn't even part of our poll worker training. And someone noticed it, a poll watcher noticed it somewhere in Arkansas and said that it wasn't at a polling location. And then all of a sudden, it became part of our training, because all of us were looking, what do you mean we have to send a list? And we're like, we didn't know, because it had never been part of our training. And then all of a sudden, it is here, because
Wow.
it is in the law.
Yeah.
I will tell you, I satisfy my requirement of the digital copy of the sample ballots on those same tablets.
Mhm.
So they're still gonna have to go out to the polls no matter what, but it'd be one less thing I have to fill on.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay, we're getting to the end, transfer of voter registration between counties.
So this is in the Constitution, and, you know, it lays out basically that voters have to transfer between counties 4 days before, otherwise they're not eligible to vote in that election. These are registered voters in the state of Arkansas, so it's not like they're registered in Texas or Oklahoma. These are people who are registered to vote in the state. Voters are allowed to change their address on election day within the county, but they're not allowed to change it between.
From another county.
Right. I think it's definitely something to look at, because we have a lot of voters that fall into this category, especially in our area.
Right.
Where
Sure.
voters
Yeah.
move between Benton and Washington County,
Yeah.
in other areas, and these voters are not, their ballots aren't counted. They're provisional ballots. Most of the time, they'll vote a provisional ballot, and it doesn't count. In either one of our counties, it won't.
Don't the systems talk to each other?
They
The
do
county
not.
clerk's system?
So-
Normally, maybe not on election day, though.
So Power Profile talks to one another, but when we are working election day, we're working with Central Point, so it's a totally different system. Our Central Point tablets don't talk to one another
In the county.
in the counties, and we don't want them to. We can barely.
You mean
get the-
between counties?
Yeah, between
Yeah,
counties.
yeah,
We can
yeah.
barely get our smart update for all
Oh,
counties
yeah.
to work. If we were trying to do all 75 counties update, it wouldn't work. I think our solution is, and it will have to be a legislative change, though, is to allow that voter to vote a provisional ballot on election day. That lets us then confirm, once the voter updates are completed, make sure that they didn't vote in another county, and then we could count their ballot. They're still gonna vote a provisional. I don't see any other way for them to not vote a provisional. But at least when they do vote that provisional, and we can confirm that they didn't vote in the county they were registered in, we could go ahead and count their provisional ballot.
You think that's a reasonable solution then?
Well, if the legislature won't change it.
No, we have to have that change. We can't do it on our own.
Well, and the question is, if they don't make that change, the provisional ballot doesn't count.
Right.
So, I mean, that
They're
seems.
voting a provisional ballot now already.
Right.
It wouldn't change the way things are done.
Exactly.
It's gonna change whether or not they get counted later
Right.
on.
Yeah.
After verification.
Yeah, and, I mean, that seems reasonable to me,
Yeah.
as long as you know they're registered in another county and they haven't voted there, they're voting here.
Right. And that, I think, is fair, because they are registered to vote in
Yeah.
the state.
Yeah.
Sure.
You know,
Yep.
it's not like someone who's registered to vote out of state.
Yep.
Not a good reason to say no.
Exactly. These are voters who are registered to vote in the state. And this law about changing your voter registration between 4 days is so unknown. I mean, we talk about it all the
Yeah,
time, but
right.
people don't pay attention. Now, if you wanted to strengthen the current law, I think you could make a legislative law that would require anytime someone signs a lease or buys a new
yeah, we
house,
talked about that.
they're required to fill out a voter registration card if they want to vote. That could strengthen that, because then if I sign a lease and I move up to Benton County and I sign a lease up in Benton County, if I fill out a voter registration card, then I'm automatically then registered to vote in Benton County. Now, we're getting another entity involved in making sure they turn in voter registration cards, but
I was gonna say, whose responsibility is that to make
But-
sure it gets turned in?
But I think that you could just suggest that rather
I
than,
think
Well-
if they were even
Required.
able to hand them
I-
a copy of
Yeah.
that,
yeah.
it would be with their paperwork, and they were like, oh, yeah, I gotta fill that out and get that turned in, rather
Right.
than just not even thinking about it.
yeah.
I mean, the solution is online voter registration or online change of addresses for voter registration.
Yeah.
It makes zero sense that you can't register to vote online anymore, or you can't change your address, because if you could, I think we would have
County clerk,
we
okay,
would have a lot more
not
updates.
Not
Not
between
between
counties.
counties?
See,
Okay.
so that's the difference too, it makes it harder for voters. So if I moved within the county, I can call the clerk and she'll change, and they can change my address. Are we not live anymore? We don't know.
No, it looks like it.
Okay.
It is.
I'll go, give me a second, I'll go.
Okay. But if I move between counties, I have to fill out a new voter registration card.
Yeah, and
The only way to do it.
and you can't do it online. We do everything online, you know? Should be able to you should be able to fill out a form online to register to vote. And I think that would that would fix a lot of these address problems.
In fact, can we get rid of the DMV registration?
well, yeah. Yeah, that would be-
Well, we need to fix that too.
Well, yeah, I don't,
We stopped it.
that's something that, I don't know, I honestly don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, but I think that barring other solutions, that would fix it, just adding,
Sure.
instead of saying that they're not eligible to vote, they voted provisional ballot, you confirm that they didn't vote in the county they were registered at, and they
That's totally reasonable.
so.
Okay, let's quickly, do you see any of these failed bills from 2019 that you think will come up again, that we
Well-
haven't already talked about?
The consolidation one, that 2017 and 2019, both times it has almost passed.
Okay. So that being the case, potentially, first time up might be the charm.
It might be, but I think what we're gonna be left with is just elections on the primary and the general, which we don't necessarily want, because, so if we have a fire district election, it creates new precincts, because fire district lines don't align with other things. I think we have to have some dates for special elections, like annexations, like
Yeah.
fire districts, those type of things.
Otherwise, the ballot faces are just gonna be astronomical, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, is there I mean, I don't know this because I've never been a legislator, but is there a way to consolidate but to exclude fire district, water district, and give them, and, permit them to determine under certain criteria?
Yeah, some of the language I've seen when they've written the consolidation bills have been to, in a case of an emergency, like, so for instance, if all of a sudden the county needed to pass a sales tax because a disaster had happened, you could hold a special, you could get a special election.
In spite of the consolidation.
Exactly.
Okay.
There were some exceptions for, if you had a vacancy for the mayor, or there were different
okay.
exceptions. So I think that, yes, you could, but we would need a lot of different counties to look at water, because we have fire districts, but do you have fire districts? Not every county has fire districts, so not every county is aware of that. You have NWAC, like, those elections, which we don't have. So some counties have oddball elections that we don't necessarily have, so I'm not aware
Yeah.
of different needs for those. So I think they would need to look at the different counties that have different types of special
Right,
elections.
so they'd have, I mean, it sounds like it would just have to have some exclusion for those kinds
Yeah.
of instances. Okay, anything else on those?
A lot of times, there'll be election laws, I don't know about commissioners and different things like that, so I would expect that different ones will come up, about that. One law that, was filed was to end early voting on the Saturday before the election.
Oh,
And that would give the county time to get everything prepped and prepared for Tuesday. It didn't go anywhere. The voter registration, online voter registration has come up several years. It hasn't tend to get out of committee. But yeah, the consolidation plan is the one that,
either worries you or keeps you
yeah,
wondering.
it keeps coming
Okay.
up.
And what about that election coordinator? It was a little different this time around,
Yeah.
You think it's gonna come back up?
possibly.
Yeah, because several counties have had different issues with they have issues with the commission, the coordinator, and the judge and the clerk. And so it causes, and so they look for a legislative
So they're
fix.
trying to find a
Yeah.
fix that maybe could be done other ways.
It's just for their county a
Yeah.
lot of times.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
If it's for their county, I don't have
Yeah.
a problem with that, but it's for 75 counties.
Yeah, that's the,
I'm not,
that's the problem, legislating problems in one county at 75 county level. That's a perpetual issue with the legislature.
Yeah, you're right, continue.
I think we
Okay.
really need to watch for that one because.
Yeah, you're right, Kim.
Yeah, okay, other business? Anything else?
I'm good.
I am getting ready to bill the city for the election. I'm holding off to make sure that the quorum court passes our, grant,
Yeah.
because that determines how much I'm billing the city.
Oh, wait, so even though finance,
It has to be voted.
oh.
Right, but it's on the consent agenda,
Oh,
which means
good.
they won't even
Okay.
discuss it. So after tonight, I'll bill the city, and I'll end up billing the
They,
city
they
completely.
approved that the other night, the finance committee.
Yeah.
Handily, or they asked some foolish questions, but in my opinion.
One abstention, I believe, which I thought.
One
was-
of-
What, on accepting the free grant money?
Yeah,
When you,
who was that, Yanis?
Yeah, it was, and
Why?
actually,
Sort of,
it
What?
really surprised me. Yeah.
Why?
what was that all
I
about?
don't know, but that did surprise me.
How much
Yeah.
money are we saving the cities?
Well, we're saving the cities at least $150,000.
What do you guys think about putting in the letter, hey, you would have had to pay this, but we got this grant, so, it's only this. Credit to the grant maker, right?
You're talking about.
Just to the city, yeah, just to the city. Hey, normally you would have had to pay this, but we got this grant and saved this much money that we're not billing you, and.
Yeah, well, are you, I mean, how much time would you have spent in figuring out how much of the grant
oh my, yeah.
as opposed to what you're billing them?
Oh.
Because each one is different, right?
Oh, I've got a spreadsheet that I just plug the number in and it populates it out for me.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, if it's not a huge problem, put it in there.
I think it's worth mentioning,
News for you.
over-
It saved you a heck of a lot of
over a
money.
$200,000 grant that saved money that we didn't have to bill to the city.
Or maybe
think
you
it's-
wouldn't even have to say that, maybe you could just say, we were fortunate to get a grant, and, therefore, what we're billing you reflects that, you're getting a good deal on this.
right, because basically what I did was, so there's no money in here for early votes, so early votes was completely
Right,
covered,
right.
and half of the poll worker cost was completely
Yeah.
covered, because of the grant,
Yeah.
I
so.
think you should say the amount. We should take credit for you guys having drafted the grant and done the work and helped save the city some money.
Well,
I think it's,
avoid having to go through that CARES program because it was not guaranteed.
yeah, that's right, that's right, we knew that
Would have been a lot,
going in,
a lot different
yep.
financial outcome could
Yeah.
very well occurred, you know, had we
Did
gone
you
the
get
CARES
everything?
it
route.
could have, you're right, Bill.
From the
Yep,
CARES
you're right.
Act? Okay, good, good.
But she had someone,
The clerk's office actually took care of it.
Oh,
I
gotcha.
didn't, I just gave them my information.
Okay,
Because
okay,
I don't have the hands in my
Yeah.
office like she does, so, the clerk's office took care of that, but they were very generous.
okay, good, good, generous, yeah.
Good.
Well, good, yeah, but, if it's not too much trouble, go ahead and make it
no.
specific.
And I can either make it specific or just general, like we saved the cities this amount of.
Yeah, either way, whatever you wanna do.
General, you know.
I
No,
that-
that's
didn't
fine.
charging the city, I went ahead and
Just mention
pulled the information for how much the absentee material
Oh,
cost.
good, thank
It
you.
was $13,000.
So you're saying about
It was a dollar,
an
it was
absentee
$1
ballot?
absentee.
Okay,
When I looked at postage,
Mhm.
to print, and all the envelopes, it was $1
Yeah.
absentee ballot.
Okay.
So I went ahead and included that
That's pretty significant.
in here as well.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
yeah. So when I added everything up, they actually are paying almost exactly what they paid in 2020. So it is a good
No, wait,
thing,
in 2020,
or
2016?
2018.
Oh, 20,
So it is a good thing we got the grant because they would have been charged way more than what I'm billing them right now. So, yeah.
That's pretty impressive. Well,
Good work.
that came at the right time.
Perfectly.
Yeah, okay. Other business, anything? Let's get out of here.
You wanna go any further with this discussion, or we through with it?
That's up to you on what you guys
What do you
wanna
wanna do? What do you think? I think there are some common ground things that we all agreed on or could agree on. Maybe you guys don't feel that way, I don't know. It's a lot easier, I'll say, it would be a lot easier for me to say, hey, the whole election commission supported these items, you know, and then ask some legislators of both parties in Washington County, because we have plenty from both parties to sponsor bills. I think it's a lot easier to pass stuff that way, stuff we could actually agree on, but up to you guys, if you wanna meet again and talk about it, or how you wanna do it.
I'd like to, get your top three.
Okay.
The things that you think would be the most pressing and maybe would make the most difference in how we, proceed with elections.
I did share this list with Sebastian County today too. They
Good.
called and asked about it, and of course, some of this list came from Benton County too, so we had, in a way, collaborated on this together.
Thank you, Kim.
But yeah, I shared it with Sebastian County too, so.
So off the top of your head, what would you say are the top three? I know.
Okay.
Well, and think about it too, if you want, I don't.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
the 5-week runoff would be one. And if I wanted to take absentees and just kind of lump that together.
I think you could do that.
Because cleaning up the absentee stuff, especially if we continue to have an increase in absentees, I think just in general, refining our absentee laws is very important. And so, my third one is my big concern is the consolidation calendar.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
just because that impacts multiple things on here, filing dates for candidates, filing dates for cities, publications, it impacts a lot.
Everything,
Everything, and so I would say the consolidation calendar, definitely.
Do you concur?
I do.
Okay.
I think the only other thing I would probably add in there is publication.
Oh, yeah, publication.
And the publication thing, what is sad about that is, yes, we incur the cost, but ultimately it's the cities
cities,
that
yeah.
pay for it,
Yeah.
because I just bill 100% of the publications
Right.
to the cities. So, you know, in a way, yes, I'm saying it cost me $10,000 to do that, but it's the city. that ends up paying for it,
Right.
you know, ultimately.
But just
Yeah.
having that Sunday-only possibility of printing, it has really created, or could create a challenge for some counties. If they're not really on top of planning things out, if they miss a deadline of having it printed that Sunday, and they need to do L&A, and they can't because it's got to print 48 hours before they can do L&A,
Well, you ran into
it
that
trickles down.
too, didn't you? Because what was the deal? We let the candidate off,
Well,
and it had to be,
well, that and we had to change the polling location too. They were moving from one building to the other
Yeah, that's
building.
right,
And
that's
so,
right.
but yeah,
And you
So-
can't print it on Tuesday and make it happen on Thursday.
right,
Right.
Because you've got to wait for Sunday for it to print, and
Yeah.
Tuesday before you can do anything.
yeah.
So I think that has created a lot of issues, only having that option.
It's all the newspapers' fault.
I don't get it.
I'm not blaming Tom.
Oh, my goodness, yeah, okay. Well, I
My
guess,
circus, not my monkey.
I guess the way
Yeah,
I look at
exactly.
it, these are the things that I would start with. And I think we would have common ground on these issues that Jennifer has talked about.
the other one too.
You wanna,
It's hard, because now.
I know.
And then I looked for the
Yeah.
voter side of it, so that on me was on like our side of it.
sure,
You know what I mean? So there's two sides to it. So like, for us, we're looking at it like from working the election. But if you look at it from the voter side of it,
What can we do to help them?
the
Yep.
changing of the 4 days,
Oh, yeah.
that's a big
Yeah.
one.
yeah,
I
that
don't
is
know.
a big one.
Yeah, and the voter ID.
What can we do to help them?
Well-
But these
So-
things are also voter, even though they help you run the election, they are also voter-centered because the 5-week runoff is certainly a better, schedule for the voter who goes out of town on Thanksgiving
For
week.
early vote
Or-
and prep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the absentee thing, anything we can do to improve the absentee thing is gonna help the voters.
Yeah.
And us,
Well,
both,
and
that's a
us.
win-win.
Yeah, overall, I mean, it needs to be improved.
Yeah, I
think
agree.
We have 100% agreement on that.
So when the bottom line is that they're all important, all
Yeah.
you're trying to do is prioritize first things
Exactly.
first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's nothing to leave off of the list, it's
Right.
where do we start?
Right. Well, and the thing is, we're not gonna get the legislators' ears
No.
for everything that's on this list. And we've tried in the past, and, you know, we've had mixed success. But, that's why I think we need to find some ways to target, these are the things that we feel like would enhance the next election more. And, you know, just go from there.
And pay attention to bills that are filed that go against
Right.
some of these things that we're talking
Yeah.
about, and making sure that.
To complicate and convolute.
Exactly, yeah, yeah. So, I mean, that, to me, that's, extra vigilance is needed for the next 4 or 5 months. So, anyway, if there's nothing else, we need to.
Get out of here.
How long ago was it I said we were gonna get out of here? Sorry, y'all.
It's all right, good
So-
discussion, good list. Yeah,
Hold
what-
on, one last thing. Next meeting?
Yeah, what do you want it, next meeting? We wanna have
It's
it,
in January, it is.
The 11th.
Yeah.
No, that's the 14th.
The 14th or 15th, I'll
Yeah.
email you.
Okay,
Okay.
Yeah.
all right, so we've got nothing the rest of the year,
Right.
Unless you call something,
Yeah, yes,
okay?
something comes up, I don't
Yeah.
anticipate. All
All
right,
right,
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays,
Merry Christmas.
Happy Hanukkah.
thank you for coming.
Kim, thanks for coming.
Yeah.
We're glad you were here.
Appreciate you coming, appreciate your input.
That's right.
All right.
Max, have a good one.
Oh, you gotta get back to it, you
You
guys
guys-
have
All
a good one.
right, you too.
You want to
figure out how to, I will be available by phone, so, yeah.
Well, okay, sure. No, let's do it. You wanna do it before Christmas or after?